Okay, class, we're about to start on section 2.1, Introduction to Integers. It says section A, integers and the number line graphs. Okay, now we have 0 here, and on this side of 0 we have our negative numbers, and on this side of 0 we have our positive numbers. 0 is neither negative nor positive. So we know right here where this arrow is going, that is 0. Okay, now we scroll down here. It says graph -1 and 2 on the number line. So what we would do is we would go on the number line and find -1, which is here, and we will put a point here at -1, and then for 2 we will put a point at 2 as well. Okay, now we scroll down here. It says on the number line, smaller numbers always appear to the left of larger numbers. Now we have the inequality symbols. This symbol means less than, this symbol means greater than. As we show here, meaning this is less than, so an example 5 is less than 8. This means greater than, so 6 is greater than 4. Now if you cannot remember this, what you can remember is this here. The inequality symbol points to the lower number. If you notice, this is pointing to the 5 and this is pointing to the 4, and you notice that these two are the lower numbers of this inequality. It says insert less than or greater than between each pair of numbers to make a true statement. Now we had -3 and 3. Now we know all positive numbers are always greater than negative numbers, so we know -3 is less than 3. Now we come here to number 2. We have 0 and -5. Remember, 0 and any positive number is always greater than a negative number. So 0 is greater than -5. Okay, now we go to number 3. Number 3 states -7 and -12. Now whenever you're dealing with two negative numbers, you always look at the negative number that's closest to 0 as to which one is the highest or the largest. So we know -7 is closer to 0 than -12. So our answer here would be -7 is greater than -12. Now, just as a real life application, remember, if you owed somebody money, would you rather owe them $7 or $12? Most of us would choose to only owe $7, so that have the greater value. So -7 is greater than -12. Now we scroll to section C. It says finding the absolute value of a number. The absolute value of a number is the number's distance from 0 on the number line. So what we would do is this here. Let's take a look at this example here. The number 3 is 3 units away from the 0. So we say the absolute value of 3 is equal to 3. Now your absolute value look like straight bars here. Now the number -3 is 3 units away from 0, and we could prove that. We'll start here at -3 and we'll move this until we get to 0. So we move 1, 2, 3 places. So it's 3 places away from 0, or 3 units away from 0. So we say the absolute value of -3 is also 3. Now one thing you need to know about absolute value does not mean opposite. Because if it meant opposite, this absolute value of +3 would have been -3. It just means the distance from 0. And also another thing too, your absolute value, the answer to your absolute value is always positive or 0 when you get your absolute value. So here we have the absolute value of -6. We know this equals 6. The absolute value of 4, it's 4. And the absolute value of 0 is just 0. Now I want to add in one other absolute value here that's not shown here, and you can write this down as example 4. We could do the absolute value of, well, the opposite of the absolute value of -6. Now we know the absolute value of -6 is 6, but we will bring its sign over as well. So your answer here would be -6. The reason why this is -6 is because the negative sign is on the outside of the absolute value bars. So we would do another example, and we would do number 5. We'd take the absolute value, the negative absolute value of positive 6. So we know the absolute value of positive 6 is 6. And we will bring over the negative sign. So our answer here is negative 6 as well. Remember, if the negative sign is on the outside, we do the absolute value first, then we bring the negative sign over. Now we scroll down here to section D, the opposite of a number. Two numbers that are the same distance from 0 on the number line but are on opposite sides are called opposites. We saw above that both 3 and negative 3 were 3 units away from 0. 3 and negative 3 are opposites. Now we have this number 9. The opposite of 9 is negative 9. The opposite of negative 5 is just 5. The opposite of 0, 0's opposite is actually itself. So the opposite of 0 is just 0. And the opposite of positive 1 is negative 1. Now, and also one other way you could tell if they're opposites, if you add them together, it will equal 0. Like 9 plus negative 9 is 0, negative 5 plus 5 is 0, and so on. Whenever you add opposites, they must equal 0. Now it tells us simplify. Now we have this opposite, the absolute value of 4. Now we know the absolute value of 4 is 4, and we bring down our negative. So our final answer here is negative 4. Now we come here to number 2. This is not an absolute value. This is just a parenthesis. So we have the opposite of negative 12, which is just positive 12. Now we go down here to number 1, where we substitute. Now we still have our opposite, the absolute value. And remember, I always put in what I substitute in parentheses, just to show that it has been substituted for. So now we have the absolute value of a negative 6, which we know is 6, but we will bring down this negative that was on the outside. Now we go here to number 2. We have the negative, and we're going to substitute in negative 6 for x. So now we know the opposite of negative 6 is positive 6. So that is our final answer. Now we come here to section E, applications of integers. Where do we see integers used in everyday life? Now we see integers used on a thermometer, a thermometer, a thermostat, let me get this T crossed here, and we have various other things that we see integers used on. But what we're going to do in class, we're going to name, other things as well. We could also say this here. Integers include positive and negative numbers as well as 0, but it does not include your decimals or your fractions. So you could also say we also use integers with age. We just don't use its negative counterpart. And also we could think of one other thing that we use integers for. We also use integers to describe sea level. That's another place that we use integers. Okay, it says example. A deep sea diver is 836 feet below the surface of the ocean. Represent this position using an integer. I know it says ocean, but we're going to assume that it is sea level. So if it's 836 feet below the surface of the ocean or sea level, it'll be a negative 836 feet. And that will be our answer. Now, we come down here to this next example. According to the bar graph below, which planet has the highest average temperature? Now we look here at this bar graph below here. The highest average temperature belonged to Venus. Okay, so it's Venus. and we're asked what is it. Now if you go to Venus, at the top of it, it has 867 degrees. Now we have to check and see if it's in Fahrenheit or Celsius, just to be sure. It says degrees Fahrenheit, so we will put the Fahrenheit. So it's 867 degrees Fahrenheit. Now we go to B. Which planet has the lowest average temperature? And they also want to know what it is. Okay, so the lowest average temperature would be Neptune, and it's negative 330 degrees Fahrenheit. So we add Neptune, and it's also negative 330 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that is very cold. Okay, now this takes care of section 2.1. We're going to start on section 2.2. It says adding integers. It says adding integers. When adding positive values can be visualized as steps to the right on the number line, while negative values can be visualized as steps to the left on the number line. It says here add using a number line. So we have 4 plus 3. The first thing we will have to do is go here to 4. Now, since it's plus 3, that means we go 3 to the right from 4. So we have 1, 2, 3. So we went 3 places. So our answer here is positive 7. And what I would do is I would end this with an arrowhead just to show where we stopped at. Okay, now we have negative 6 plus negative 2. So first thing we would do is go here to negative 6. And then we know from negative 6 we have to go 2 to the left because we're adding a negative 2. So we'll go 1, 2. So we end up here at negative 8. Now we come down here to number 3. We have negative 8 plus 3. So we start with negative 8, and since 3 is positive, we will go 3 to the right. We'll go 1, 2, 3. So negative 8 plus 3 will give us negative 5. Now we go here to number 4. We have 5 plus negative 1. We go to the number 5 on the number line, and since we're adding a negative 1, that means we go back 1. Go to the left 1. So that gives us a positive 4. Now we scroll down here to the next page. It says rules for adding integers. Decide whether to add or subtract. Okay, step 1. We have to decide whether to add or subtract. If they have the same sign, we will add them together. If they have opposite signs, we will subtract them. Now step 2. It says decide whether the answer is positive or negative. The answer takes the sign of the larger number. Hint, visualize the moves on a number line. Do you end up on the right or left of 0? So we add negative 3 plus negative 19. If we have the same signs, we add them. So 3 and 19 we know is 22, and we also keep their sign. Okay, number 2. We have 2 plus a negative 8. First of all, we're going to subtract this. Now, it doesn't matter which one has the negative sign. Let's just do regular subtraction. If we do 8 minus 2, that gives us 6, right? So we know our final answer is going to be 6. But we need to know whether it's going to be a positive 6 or a negative 6. To determine which one, whether we will have a negative or positive 6, think of the distance from 0. This is 2 from 0. This is 8 from 0. So 8 is larger than 2. So your final answer would be a negative 6. Now we scroll down here. Negative 1 plus 6. Now we know we would do regular subtraction. 6 from 1. We know 1 from 6 is 5. Now to determine its sign, we know 6 has the larger absolute value at the largest distance from 0. So the 5 will stay positive. Now we go here to number 4. Negative 12 and 30. They have the same sign, so you would add them together. That'll give you 42, and you would give it the same sign. Now we come down here to number 5. It's the same thing. It'll just give us a negative 25. 17 and 8 is 25, and we carry its sign.